I knew something was off. The second I stepped into the lobby, and the receptionist would not meet my eyes, and I mean would not, like her pupils were magnetically glued to a crack in the marble floor. I had not even set my briefcase down when a message hit my phone, an urgent performance review. I had just wrapped 12 consecutive quarters of growth. 12. We landed the biggest account 3 weeks prior, projected $28 million in revenue over the next 3 years. I built that deal from a napkin sketch on a flight. But now suddenly, I am getting ghost texted into a last-minute meeting like I am about to be scolded for stealing someone's yogurt. When you have worked in finance this long, you develop a sixth sense, a psychic tickle in your spine when the vultures start circling, and my spine was screaming. Cynthia's door was cracked when I passed it. She was whispering to someone with that fake sympathy lilt she uses when she fires interns, the same one she used when she told an accountant that his role had evolved beyond his scope. Which is corporate for, we gave your job to a 22-year-old with a ring light and a stepdad on the board. Anyway, I took the long way to the meeting room, not out of fear, just strategy. Gave myself time to breathe, scan the halls, and clock who was avoiding me. A few guilty heads turned. One guy I had mentored for 5 years literally ducked into the copy room, and that is when I knew it was happening. I slipped into my office and opened the locked drawer, my original contract. 8 pages of legalese, 3 of which I'd renegotiated after Q4 last year. I flipped to Clause 11C, read it, reread it, ran my finger over the initials, Cynthia's, Martin's, mine. I folded the papers, slid them into my leather portfolio, and stood up. Adjusted my jacket, smiled into the mirror just once, then walked out. Every step I took down that long carpeted corridor felt like walking the plank, only I had the anchor in my hands. I had sacrificed holidays, weekends, and personal relationships to build the revenue structure they were now coasting on. Martin, the CEO, had always been a corporate parasite. He survived by taking credit for the work of those beneath him and deflecting blame onto the most vulnerable. I had known this from day one, which was exactly why I insisted on a bulletproof contract. The walls were decorated with framed motivational quotes, empty platitudes that made my stomach turn. I could hear the faint sound of the city traffic outside, a stark contrast to the absolute silence on the executive floor. People were pretending to type, their eyes darting nervously toward my office. I remembered the night I drafted that specific clause. I was recovering from a severe bout of pneumonia, hooked up to an intravenous drip, typing furiously on my laptop. I knew that the moment I secured the massive funding round, my usefulness would expire. In this business, gratitude has a very short shelf life. I had to protect myself. Clause 11C was my masterpiece. A beautifully written trap designed to look like standard boilerplate language to anyone too lazy or arrogant to read it closely. And Martin was the king of lazy arrogance. I finally reached the conference room. The heavy wooden door stood slightly ajar. I pushed it open, and the atmosphere inside was thick with tension. Cynthia looked up, her expression a fragile mask of professionalism. The 2 human resources representatives sat stiffly beside her, looking like deer caught in the headlights. The room smelled faintly of stale coffee and fear. I did not sit down. I stood there, letting the silence stretch, forcing them to squirm under my gaze. I wanted them to remember this moment, to engrave it in their minds. This was the moment they thought they were winning, the moment before the world came crashing down on them. I kept my face impassive, showing absolutely no emotion. In poker, they call this a stone-cold bluff, but I was not bluffing. I was holding a royal flush. Cynthia cleared her throat again, the sound echoing unnaturally in the quiet rooms. She began, her voice trembling just a fraction. I could almost smell her anxiety. She launched into the rehearsed speech, the standard human resources jargon designed to sanitize the act of destroying a person's livelihood. Restructuring, pivoting, new directions. It was all a pathetic attempt to hide the raw truth. They wanted my money. They wanted to fire me before my multi-million-dollar bonus vested, keeping the cash for their own executive bonuses. I listened to the entire speech without interrupting, letting her dig the hole deeper with every word. When she finally finished, panting slightly as if she had just run a marathon, I simply nodded. "Understood," I said softly. I placed my security badge on the table. The plastic clicked against the wood. a final sound that signaled the end of my employment. They thought it was the end of the story, but it was just the prologue. As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the polished glass of the conference room window. I looked calm, composed, completely in control. I had 48 years of experience, wisdom, and ruthlessness coursing through my veins. I walked out of the room, leaving them to their hollow victory, knowing that by this time tomorrow, they would be begging for mercy. I strode back to my office, packed a small box with my personal items, and left the building. The sun was shining brightly as I hailed a taxi, the vibrant energy of the city matching the adrenaline rushing through me. The trap was set, the bait was taken, and now all I had to do was wait for the trap to snap shut. And when it did, it was going to echo throughout the entire financial district. Instead of heading straight down to the parking garage, I swiped my access card in the elevator and punched the button for the 45th floor, the sanctuary of legal and compliance. The elevator hummed smoothly, lifting me higher above the city streets. My mind was sharp, calculating the exact sequence of events that needed to follow. I had spent enough time on the 45th floor to know who possessed a shred of integrity and who was merely a corporate lapdog. The receptionist, a young woman who always looked perpetually exhausted, barely glanced up until I dropped my heavy leather folder onto her desk with a solid thud. "Tell Ian I am here," I commanded, keeping my voice even but firm. She blinked, startled by the sudden intrusion. "Do you have an appointment?" she stammered. "I just got fired," I replied, allowing a small, cold smile to touch my lips. "He will want to see me." Ian was an assistant counsel, a brilliant and observant man who used to shadow me during intense negotiations. He was sharp, analytical, and most importantly, he understood the perilous undercurrents of Apex Financial. 10 minutes later, I was ushered into his office. He quickly closed the heavy oak door behind us and gave me a look that was a mixture of shock and sheer panic. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice hushed. "They let me go," I said, taking a seat opposite his desk. Effective immediately. No cause cited, no severance discussion beyond the standard baseline, and absolutely no mention of the incentive clause. His brow furrowed, confusion clouding his features. Which clause? I opened my leather folder, meticulously extracted the contract, flipped to the designated page, and slid it across the polished desk. Clause 11C, paragraph 3, subsection A, I instructed. He leaned forward, scanning the text. He read it once quickly, then a second time, much slower. His facial expression remained neutral, but I could see his eyes sharpen as the gravity of the legal language hit him. "Did you add this during your Q4 renegotiation?" he asked, his voice filled with a quiet awe. They initialed every single page. Martin even asked what the multiplier line meant during the board meeting. I told him it was to cover transitional risk in the event I left the company. He just shrugged it off. Ian sat back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "Donovan," he began, shaking his head slightly, "this clause is completely airtight. If they fired you within 24 hours of your vesting date, they owe you the full bonus, plus 50% of your final year base salary, plus associated damages if contested in arbitration." "Correct," I confirmed, leaning back and crossing my arms. And it was not just Martin who dropped the ball. Cynthia knew as well. She signed the implementation memo last December. I have the digital document with her metadata on my personal secure drive, time-stamped, notarized, backed up in 3 separate locations. Ian let out a soft, horrified laugh, a sound that conveyed both amusement and dread. "They actually thought they could short-circuit the multi-million-dollar payout by axing you a single day early? They must think that termination somehow voids the obligation. But the clause specifically activates because of the termination. This is going to completely melt faces upstairs," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "I am not here for revenge," I stated calmly. "I am here for enforcement." He nodded slowly, processing the magnitude of the impending corporate earthquake. "You want this escalated to the lead counsel immediately?" "I would prefer if the escalation came from you," I suggested. "At first, keep it quiet. You have relationships in this department that I do not, and I would rather the collapse happen from the inside out. Naturally. Let them realize their own fatal mistake." Ian did not say much after that. He simply took out his phone, snapped a high-resolution photo of the specific page, scanned my entire folder using his desktop scanner, and securely emailed himself the heavily annotated packet. I thanked him for his time, retrieved my documents, and walked out of his office. The legal floor always smelled like printer toner and burnt ambition, a place where dreams were laminated and filed away next to compliance manuals that nobody ever read until they were slapped with a subpoena. I walked past the framed photos of past general counsels, men who had navigated these treacherous waters before me, and headed for the exit. Meanwhile, several floors below, Cynthia stormed into the human resources war room like she was auditioning for the lead role in a corporate panic attack. Her face was flushed red, she was blinking rapidly, and she was already sweating profusely through the expensive silk lining of her tailored blazer. She simply slammed her laptop onto the large conference table and barked at her team. "We need documentation right now." Across the table, a junior representative blinked at her, looking entirely lost. Documentation of what, exactly? Cynthia glared at him. "Of Donovan's termination. I need something that shows we had just cause. A performance waiver, a disciplinary write-up, an incident log, an email complaint, absolutely anything you can find." The representative nervously typed with 2 fingers, scrolling through my personnel file, which was notoriously empty of infractions. "Cynthia," he said hesitantly, "he has never even had a formal warning. There is not a single verbal coaching note. His record is impeccably clean." Cynthia threw her hands up in the air, a gesture of pure desperation. "There has to be something," she shouted. "He is building a case against us. He walked out of here way too calm, way too collected. And now I am hearing whispers that legal is looking into the contract." Downstairs in the compliance department, a quiet but deafening alarm had already started to ring. Ian had taken the folder directly to Valerie, the board's lead counsel. Valerie was a formidable woman, sharp as a scalpel and utterly ruthless when it came to protecting the company's liability. She read the clause once, her face turning the color of skim milk. She immediately requested a discreet but exhaustive review of my employment history, my contract amendments, and all compensation triggers. At the exact same time, Cynthia was desperately dialing extensions in her office, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "Jerry, it is Cynthia," she practically yelled into the receiver. "I need all the emails tied to Donovan's Q4 renegotiation. Contracts, internal board approvals, equity schedules, every single scrap of paper." "What do you mean it is archived in the offsite server? Then unarchive it immediately." While the company began to tear itself apart from the inside, I was outside, walking down the sunlit pavement, feeling the warm breeze against my face. The pieces were moving exactly as I had designed. The trap was springing, and they were caught firmly in its steel jaws. I was not just another executive. I was the architect of their downfall. While the chaos steadily compounded within the towering glass walls of Apex Financial, I found myself sitting comfortably at a small independent coffee shop about 4 blocks away from the corporate headquarters. It was one of those artisanal places where the baristas wore denim aprons and the tables were made of thick, reclaimed wood. I ordered a simple black coffee, took a seat near the large front window, and opened my laptop. The city moved quickly outside, oblivious to the multi-million-dollar corporate implosion I had just triggered. My phone buzzed quietly against the wooden table. A message had arrived from Ian. It was brief and entirely devoid of emotion, exactly as I expected. "Valerie has the file. She is convening an emergency session with the chief financial officer." I replied with a simple acknowledgement. "Understood. Keep me posted if they attempt any retroactive file alterations." I had every single document backed up, secured, and time-stamped, ensuring that any attempt they made to forge a disciplinary record would only add severe legal penalties to their already astronomical bill. Back in the executive bunker, the atmosphere was growing increasingly toxic. Valerie stood silently behind Cynthia, who was now frantically scribbling something onto a yellow legal pad, as if writing down random thoughts could somehow rewrite the past 24 hours. "Cynthia," Valerie said, her voice dropping to a temperature that could freeze water. Cynthia jumped, startled, her pen skidding across the paper. "Yes?" Valerie held up the heavily annotated contract packet. "Is this your signature on page 6 of the implementation memo?" Cynthia squinted at the document, her face losing what little color it had left. Well, yes, but I did not read all the specific amendments. Martin just told me that we needed him to stay through the critical fourth quarter, so I pushed the paperwork through. Valerie raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. And you initialed every single page of this binding legal document without reading the terms? Well, yes, Cynthia stammered, her voice shaking. We were rushing to finalize the headcount projections before the board meeting. Valerie slowly tapped at her perfectly manicured fingernail against the folder. Then what the hell does he want from us? And that was the fundamental question, was it not? The heavy oak door to the main executive boardroom slammed shut like the lid of a heavy wooden coffin. Inside, the ambient temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees, and it was certainly not due to the air conditioning system. Valerie stood at the very head of the long mahogany table, her eyes sharp, her jaw tightly locked. She was not wearing her usual diplomatic smile. She was wearing her corporate war paint. Martin, Cynthia, and the entire compensation committee were already seated around the table. Glasses of ice water sat completely untouched. Expensive leather notepads remained firmly unopened. The silence in the room was so thick you could have stirred it with a wooden spoon. Let us get one thing absolutely straight, Valerie began, pulling a thick stack of printed documents from her folio and slapping them down onto the table like damning evidence in a federal criminal trial. This is not a simple miscommunication. It is not a minor human resources oversight. This is a massive ticking liability with a lit fuse that we foolishly ignited ourselves. Martin leaned back in his chair, desperately trying to maintain his aura of control. Look, we all know he is making a lot of noise, but he is obviously bluffing. He has always been somewhat dramatic when things do not go his way. He is not bluffing, Valerie snapped, her voice much louder than anyone in the room expected. And this is certainly not drama. This is contractual suicide. She opened the primary folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper, sliding it forcefully across the polished wood toward Cynthia. Page 6 of the fourth quarter amendment, showcasing your digital signature. Cynthia refused to even look at the document. I did not read every single line, she protested weakly. You initialed every line, Valerie cut in sharply, and so did Martin. You both explicitly signed off on Clause 11C, including the activation multiplier language, the restrictive vesting window clause, and the constructive termination trigger. Constructive termination? Martin repeated, his brow deeply furrowed in genuine confusion. It means you fired him under highly specific circumstances designed exclusively to avoid paying him a binding contractual obligation, Valerie explained, speaking slowly as if addressing a small child. Which, in the strict eyes of the law, is exactly the same as firing him because of that obligation. Cynthia's face turned completely pale. But we fired him due to department restructuring. We never even mentioned the bonus during the meeting. That is precisely the root of the problem, Valerie said, shaking her head. There is absolutely no cause documented anywhere in his file. There are no performance flags. There are no disciplinary notes. There is no redundancy justification formally filed with human resources. You literally walked him out of the building 23 hours before a massive scheduled equity vest without a single valid reason, and you arrogantly thought that would somehow void his bonus. What it actually did was aggressively activate every single financial protection he cleverly embedded in that specific clause. She turned her intense gaze to the rest of the silent room now. Gentlemen, ladies, this was not just a poor management decision. This was a $6.5 million trigger wrapped tightly in arrogance and fired carelessly like a starter's pistol. One of the senior committee members nervously cleared his throat. Is this contract truly enforceable? We are not enforceable, Valerie stated grimly. He has verified timestamps, secure backups, extensive email trails, and unaltered metadata. His termination was formally filed internally exactly 37 minutes after he submitted his active clause to the Legal and Compliance Department. That actively creates the overwhelming impression, both legally and publicly, of direct corporate retaliation. Martin muttered something highly inappropriate under his breath and forcefully pushed his expensive ergonomic chair back, looking as though he was about to storm out of the room. Valerie immediately raised her voice, commanding the space. Sit down. Martin froze in place. He had never heard her speak to him with such raw authority before. Valerie walked slowly and deliberately to the large interactive touchscreen located at the head of the boardroom table, tapped in a secure command, and brought up a highly magnified document on the 80-inch display. It was the original equity agreement, completely scanned and digitally signed. She zoomed in closely on the text, Clause 11C. In the event of involuntary or constructive termination within 24 hours, preceding a scheduled equity vesting event, the subject shall be entitled to full vesting acceleration, immediate payout at current market value, and additional compensation calculated at 1.5 times base salary. Arbitration shall be waived at the employee's sole discretion. A heavy silence fell over the room, so loud it practically roared in their ears. Who in the hell approved that ridiculous clause? Someone whispered in disbelief. Valerie tapped the screen once more. A clear signature line filled the massive display. Board Chairman Richard Holloway. The entire room let out a collective, pained groan. Martin's eyes went incredibly wide. Wait, Richard actually signed that? He did, Valerie confirmed, crossing her arms. Back in 2019, right before we closed the critical Series B funding round, Donovan meticulously wrote the clause as specialized retention insurance. Richard completely agreed it was entirely fair given his pivotal role in structuring our early compliance infrastructure. It has sat completely untouched for 3 long years, and now it is about to cost us a fortune. Cynthia, speaking barely above a terrified whisper, asked, "Why did we not catch it?" Valerie's voice dropped to a deadly, icy calm. "Because you never bothered to read the fine print. You were entirely too focused on generating headlines and securing handshakes." Meanwhile, Donovan was quietly writing his brilliant escape plan in plain sight. In permanent ink, featuring your initials. The committee shifted uneasily in their expensive chairs. Someone finally dared to ask the inevitable question, "Is there any possible fix for this?" Valerie shook her head slowly. "There is no clean fix. If we try to settle now, it will immediately signal overwhelming guilt. If we go to court, we will absolutely lose. If we try to stall the process, he can easily escalate the matter directly to the full board of directors. If we attempt to retroactively justify the firing by manufacturing cause, he already possesses the pristine version control data on every single document, including yours, Martin. It is all safely locked away in his personal legal archive. He has been 10 steps ahead of us since the exact moment he handed you his security badge." Martin slumped backward in his chair, completely defeated. "What does he want?" Valerie stared directly into his eyes. "He does not want anything from you. That is the part you still do not seem to comprehend. He does not need anything. He already won." The phone call came in just after noon while I was sitting alone in the beautifully landscaped rooftop garden of my luxury condominium building. My phone buzzed once against the glass table, then again. I did not immediately recognize the incoming number, but I already knew exactly who it was before I even touched the glowing screen. There is a very specific flavor of corporate panic that only emanates from the extreme upper echelons of a company. It is the kind of nervous energy that aggressively vibrates through glass walls and complex bonus structures. I answered the call on the second ring, my voice remaining as calm and measured as ever. "Donovan speaking," I said, taking a slow sip of my expensive herbal tea. "Donovan," the voice on the other end said, attempting to sound cool and composed, but clearly fraying around the edges. "It is Richard Holloway." From the board of directors, I smiled faintly to myself, watching the city below. Richard had once offered me a highly lucrative position at a rival firm, handling the recruitment directly and discreetly, dangling enough zeros to make any executive pause and reconsider their loyalty. He had always possessed a highly accurate radar for identifying where the real, quiet power lived within a corporate structure, and I strongly suspected that intuitive radar was exactly what had prompted this sudden phone call. "Richard," I said warmly, projecting absolute confidence. "To what do I owe this rare pleasure?" "I will just get straight to it," he said, abandoning the pleasantries. "Did you intentionally intend to aggressively trigger Clause 11C?" I did not even blink, keeping my gaze fixed on the horizon. They chose to terminate my employment unexpectedly. I merely ensured that I left a legally flawless paper trail in my wake. A heavy, thoughtful silence stretched across the line. I let it hang there comfortably, feeling absolutely no pressure to fill the void. I have personally read the clause, he said finally, his tone shifting to one of reluctant respect. I have seen the extensive annotations, your verified timestamps. Frankly speaking, it is one of the absolute cleanest, most ruthlessly effective risk shields I have ever seen successfully embedded in a standard executive incentive package. I had some excellent mentors along the way, I replied smoothly. Several of them happen to sit on your current board of directors. He chuckled quietly under his breath. It was not a sound of joy, but rather a sound of deep admiration strongly edged with impending dread. Martin is still aggressively insisting that this was merely a minor administrative oversight. I am quite sure he is, I responded dryly. Cynthia is desperately claiming she never fully understood the mathematical implications of the multiplier. She understood it more than enough to legally sign it twice and aggressively push it through the human resources pipeline, without requesting any further legal review, I replied, my voice sharpening just a fraction. That specific memo she sent on December 14th? I deliberately flagged the precise language in bold text explicitly underlined. Her digital initials are permanently stamped in the margin, clearly time-stamped. The document metadata remains completely intact. Christ, Richard muttered, sounding genuinely exhausted. Another long pause followed, and then a different, more urgent voice entered the background of the call. It was muffled, but the panic was unmistakable. Richard, the voice insisted. He did not just trigger the standard payout. There is a massive secondary multiplier explicitly tied to the current equity value ratio. We just finished recalculating the total exposure. I waited patiently, listening to the frantic corporate scramble like it was a beautifully composed symphony. $6.4 million, the panicked voice reported. Possibly significantly more, depending heavily on the final market value recalibration at the exact time of his termination. Richard came back onto the main line, clearing his throat. Because of the clause's explicit reference to your unvested equity and the aggressive 1.5 times multiplier, your total guaranteed payout is actually well above $6 million. I did not respond immediately. I was peacefully watching a small pigeon pace back and forth along the glass railing, acting as if it was aggressively conducting a high-stakes board meeting of its own. Richard, I said calmly, leaning forward slightly, you are not calling me to debate the financial mechanics of the payout. You are calling me to carefully assess the impending public fallout. I am calling, he admitted with a heavy sigh, because Cynthia is about to be violently thrown to the corporate wolves, and Martin is desperately pretending he cannot hear the incredibly loud howling right outside his office door. Valerie desperately wants to reach a quiet settlement, but you have not made a single move. You have presented no counteroffer, issued no public statement, and retained no external lawyer. Why? I leaned back deeply into my comfortable chair, letting the warm sun hit my face. I played this entirely by their book. In fact, I wrote the damn book. They just completely forgot that I never actually stopped editing the chapters. Richard exhaled loudly, a long and low sound of defeat. They will officially ask for formal arbitration. They can certainly request it, I replied without hesitation. However, the clause explicitly grants me the sole undisputed discretion to politely decline that request. If they choose litigation, I added with a casual shrug, they could not see, they will lose spectacularly. The documentation is completely airtight and they fully know it. That is exactly why Valerie has not reached out to me directly yet. She is desperately buying time, hoping I will eventually flinch. You will not flinch, he said quietly, stating a fact rather than asking a question. I haven't yet, I replied, allowing a soft laugh to escape. You know, Donovan, you always struck me as entirely too composed for this vicious business, Richard noted thoughtfully. Too quiet, too methodical. But watching this brilliant execution unfold, I realize now that you were not calm because you lacked competitive fire. You were calm because you knew exactly where every single explosive fuse was deeply buried. That is exactly why they hired me in the first place, I said. And precisely why they never should have carelessly fired me. The secure line went completely quiet for a long moment. Then Richard said, I assume you will eventually be getting external counsel involved to finalize the transfer. I already did, I said, my voice dripping with finality, 3 years ago, and I wrote Clause 11C, click. I ended the call. I did not smirk. I did not gloat. I simply looked up at the vast blue sky and peacefully watched the soft white clouds pass quietly overhead. $6 million was never actually the main point of this exercise. Not really. The primary point was that they arrogantly built their entire financial empire on my spine, and they foolishly thought they could violently kick it out from under themselves without suffering any severe structural consequences. But I was never angry. I was simply precise, and absolute precision always, without fail, finds its intended target. The skyline outside my hotel room later that week was all glittering glass and towering ambition. Every single building trying desperately to outshine the next. I stood barefoot on the balcony, holding a cool drink. A notification pinged from my inbox. Settlement package from Apex Financial. Payment confirmation, $6,586,250.00. I had not burned their bridge. I had simply walked away from it with the official deed securely in my hand, sold the valuable land directly underneath it, and then ruthlessly charged them exorbitant rent for the remaining ashes.